Hey guys, Lumen02. I want to kind of share a new 93-94 deck I've been working on, and it is a Twiddle Vault deck. So, the premise of the deck is to draw into or transmute into Time Vault, and then utilize Twiddle to buy extra turns with it until you can get all of the permanents out of your deck, and then utilize one of the engines of the deck, Regrowth and Time Twister, to continue to recurse the Twiddles with the Vault to continue to take infinite turns until you get all your permanents on the board. So, we're playing, unbeknownst to us, against Erhnamgeddon. We go ahead and drop down a Howling Mine on turn 1. Our opponent has a pretty potent play here. They're able to Time Walk, which means they get to essentially draw 4 additional cards, which is very potent. Hopefully they don't transmute that into something more powerful, but I figure I'm sizably enough behind that I'm going to go for a Brain Geyser here just to get deeper into my deck and try to find a transmute or my actual win condition. Well, not my win condition, but Time Vault. Fireball is the win condition. My opponent Erhnamgeddon's here, which is not that horrible for us. We're drawing a bunch of cards, and if they want to slow themselves down, my deck can actually kind of win out of nowhere. So I'm able to kind of just rebuild very rapidly and get down this Sylvan Library to rebuild up my hand as well after dumping it to get a bunch of mana on the board after Geddon. Opponent plays out a Juggernaut here. I plan on probably just blowing that up with the Fireball. I do go ahead and take some damage here just to get some more cards out of my deck, especially because they're all fast mana, or 1 land and then fast mana. Do the Fireball here, and then I believe go ahead and go for the Transmute to get the Time Vault, and then pass it over. I could have waited on that and just done a Howling Mine and left up Power Sink for a very low amount of mana, but I don't know, that seems a little dicey to me. I think I'm going to be better off if I just get the combo online. Plus, they're only showing Crumble mana right now. They're not showing they have the ability to cast Disenchant. And they may not be running it main deck. So we go ahead and Regrowth back, Time Walk again. Draw into a bazillion cards. Find the balance, which is going to buy us even more time. Find a Twiddle as well. Go ahead and Twiddle the Time Vault. Take an extra turn. I actually strip mine myself here to force them to go down on land permanents, discard cards, and lose all of their creatures. And they just go ahead and pack it in there. Game 2. So this hand is promising enough. It has a Demonic Tutor. It has Time Walk. I actually lead on that land specifically because I want to have enough mana to cast the Demonic Tutor out. I could have played the Mana Vault there. I didn't opt to go for that, though. It's possible that I wanted to. I actually do Time Walk here. Resolve the Mana Vault. I could Demonic Tutor there, but I kind of want to leave up Power Sink. Unfortunately, my opponent has Crumble, which is fairly annoying. And they essentially have no lands and all mana dorks, and they have a third Strip Mine, so they've regrowth the Strip Mine. So we've kind of gotten brown this game. We've gotten triple Strip Mined, and our opponent is finally drawn into something, but luckily we do have this Power Sink, which is still live. But they are on an active library, which makes me timorous. They get an Erhnam out. So, I have a couple choices here. I can go for balance and lose all of my mana, which does not seem good to me. Or I can just go for City in a Bottle, lose 1 land, but also kill their 4/5 to reduce their clock, and also force them to react to it. Unfortunately, they find a Seera Angel relatively fast. I do go for a Wheel of Fortune here, and unfortunately do not hit very much. Oh, they hit an Erhnamgeddon, so I just go ahead and tap their Seera. This is pretty savage. So, Sylvan Library has definitely been very good to them, and I guess to some extent probably also our Wheel of Fortune, which maybe we were too hasty in doing. I felt like I had to get into cards there, though. With them on Sylvan Library, they're going to see a lot more cards than I'm going to see. But that could have been wrong. We get hit for a lot here. And I try to Brain Geyser into Black Lotus Balance. That's literally like my ounce. And or I guess it could have been Mox plus Ancestral into Black Lotus Balance. But we're unable to get there, and we get beat to death by Sierra Angels and Erhnam and Friends. So game 3. One of the issues this deck has is it does not have a ton of counter magic, so defending its artifacts against disenchants and crumbles can be problematic. So I get a Time Walk turn here. It's essentially just going to be an Explorer here. I do go ahead and just Mana Drain this. Opponent plays Strip Mine, I believe, after we counter this, and does not Strip Mine us. So we get a whole boatload of mana. This is where my play could be questionable. Like, I think I need to get into some more action here, so I continue to just use Regrowth to get the Time Walk back. Here I Transmute, and I have one Twiddle, so if they don't have, I guess they couldn't have Crumble. But I do get the extra turn, find a Mox Sapphire. I go for a Recall here, which could have been wrong. I could have wanted to wait for a while. I just get Twiddle to take an extra turn here. I'm kind of hoping to draw into a Draw 7. I find another Twiddle. Run it back. And finally, kind of miss. I mean, we're going to eventually miss. Find a land. I mean, we may not if we hit a Time Walk, but at this point, my opponent attempts to do a balance turn, which I don't think is right. I think that's actually a bad play, but they unfortunately overtap on their white mana. The reason I think it's a bad play is because it leaves them with 0 creatures and less cards than me. Yes, they get all my lands, but and it leaves them on 2 mana, but we're both top decking at that point, and I have more artifact mana. I have more mana sources in my deck. They may not know that, but I probably do. The deck runs a whole boatload of mana sources. As you can tell, it's mostly mana or combo pieces. Draw to a Fireball here. Really what we're looking for at this point is Wheel of Fortune and or obviously the mana to cast it, but a Time Twister. Because we have expend our Recall and expend our Regrowth. I do find a balance here, but I don't want to burn it off yet. I could, but it doesn't make much sense, I don't think. Go ahead and play out my own City of Brass here. And we get crumbled. That stinks. So they obviously have a decent amount of artifact hate in their sideboard to include crumble and probably some number of disenchants. We saw it last game. Draw another mana source, though, which is good. They play out a Juggernaut and get 1 damage in. I opt to go for a balance here. It could have been more correct just to Fireball the Juggernaut and force them to continue to draw. I do have to discard a lot of my hand to do that, but it gets rid of a lot of their threats as well. But they're on Sierra Angel mana. I feel pretty good about the game when I hit this Sylvan Library, but unfortunately my opponent also hits one on their same draw step, so they're into 1 as well. I find a Twiddle and a land. I'm just going to draw through this, so I do play out the Howling Mine. Obviously it's a riskier card, but they do have Time Walk, and they do have Regrowth, which eventually will bite us in this game. But I think, generally speaking, they're seeing 5 cards. They're probably mostly going to have creatures in there. And I have this Twiddle to kind of fight creatures for a while, because really what I said is I'm looking for a draw 7 here. I find Mirror Universe, which actually buys a ton of time. And I found an answer to the Erhnamgeddon. Go ahead and play out the City in a Bottle here. My opponent blows it up with Swords to Plowshares. We're both going to lose our Cities of Brass, so I opted to take the damage there off of the City in a Bottle. Plus, I know I have Mirror on top of my deck, and at some point I'm going to cast that to get some value off of it. Believe they play Soul Ring and Sierra Angel this turn. Sierra is a problem. What this deck probably needs is like an Abyss. If it had an Abyss, I think this matchup would have been a lot easier. Obviously, they do have some number of disenchant, but not a ton, it doesn't look like. So we play out the Mirror Universe. They're probably not going to want to hit us here, but they do actually hit us, which shocks me because it makes any Fireball I may have more lethal. Or a Lightning Bolt, for that matter. Obviously, go ahead and mirror universe here to go back up to 15. I don't try to go for the Mind Twist this turn. I don't really mind if they cast out more of their hand. I have the Twiddle to tap down their threat. We get Dust to Dusted here. They have a recall as well, but we found our own as well. And the turn gets passed back to us. They again do not blow up the Howling Mine. Blowing up the Howling Mine in a Howling Mine deck is generally right. Alright, we found a Hercule's recall. Which, in actuality, I probably should have kept to bounce these mana vaults. So I go for a Mind Twist here on them, getting rid of 4 of their cards, which generally speaking should be good. So they had a Strip Mine, a land, a Swords of Plowshares, and a Seer Angel. They go ahead and blow up one of my lands and play out their Time Walk. Unfortunately, draw into the Regrowth here. Our Demonic Tutor into Regrowth for Time Walk, and that's the game right there. So they end up getting us, they hit pretty well there. That's unfortunate, but it does happen. But I think, because I did the cardinal sin of looking, we actually would have been able to get there, because what happens is we are able to Hercule's Recall on our next turn to quit taking 2 damage off of these silly mana vaults. And we were going to hit the Twister on our next in our next 3 draws. So it was unfortunate, that our opponent kind of hit the right Tron of cards. I think if they had not, our chances in the game go significantly up. The only issue is Time Twister's not epically good here because we don't have a ton of permanents on board. And, we're going to hit a lot of lands as well because Armageddon has happened, I believe, twice in this game. Once or twice. Well, Armageddon's not great against us. It is good against Time Twister because ideally with Time Twister you want to have permanent superiority numerically over your opponent, which, we weren't really able to get to in this game because our opponent had some of the right cards to include like Dust for Dust, Crumble, to get rid of some of our stuff, and then just a whole boatload of Strip Mines. Right, Wrong, or Indifferent. Strip Mine's powerful. I don't know how right 4 of it is in a 3-color deck, but it just depends on how light he's splashing blue. It looks like it's pretty small. I don't think he has any permission. I think he just has the power blue cards. So we get pretty soundly beaten here by Time Walk 2 times in a row from a pretty high life total that I think, generally speaking, would probably give us a good position. But this deck's pretty cool. I think Twiddle Vault is a pretty interesting deck. And it's probably a deck I'll continue to work on a bit. It's more of an all-in combo deck. It does not have as much protection as something like the deck. It's not a reactive deck. It's more proactive in its approach. You have, the engine of the deck, which is Twiddle plus Time Vault, so 4 Twiddles and 1 Time Vault, as well as Transmute, which allows the engine to kind of get assembled. And then the idea is, you don't have a ton of land permanents. You have mostly power mana, in the form of Vault, Soul Ring, and then all of the Moxen and the Lotus, as well as 2 Felwar Stones and some Howling Mines. So the idea is you get as many permanents as you can on the board in the early game. Utilize Twiddle plus Time Vault after finding it with Transmute to get to a point of permanent advantage, so just more permanents on the board. And then utilize Draw 7s to thin your deck of permanents and get the necessary spells to win. A lot of times the deck's going to have to utilize cards like Mirror Universe to exchange life totals with your opponent so that it can go to a possible combo win with Channel and Fireball, or just Fireball after you get beat down, because the deck does not do a very good job of defending itself. As far as protection goes, it has 1 Mana Drain and 3 Power Sinks, as well as 1 main deck Red Elemental Blast. But it tends to take a pretty sizable beating in the early to mid game. You could consider things like Nevin Yarrow's Disc, but I think that would be bad in this deck for board sweeping. Just due to the fact that the card itself would get a lot of our permanent cards. We're a 4 Howling Mine deck, and we have tons of artifact mana. with only 16 actual lands, one of which is Strip Mine, and the other is Library of Alexandria. So the deck's mana is fairly lean, so I don't think something like Nevin Jarl's Disc would be good. However, I think I could consider or see putting the Abyss in the deck, or at least in the sideboard, as a control option against more creature-based strategies like the one we faced. In regards to facing control-style decks, I don't think this deck is horribly disadvantaged, especially once you get the 3 additional Red Elemental Blasts in. Because the deck does not have threats that are prone to Swords to Plowshares, generally speaking, you can safely assume your opponent will have more dead cards, and because of having the availability of 4 Red Elemental Blast, I think generally you can beat your opponent on efficiency if you're playing it something like the deck, or maybe like Power Monolith. I think Power Monolith is probably a better combo than this. It's also a little more fragile, though. But this is certainly a fun deck to play. I think that last game I could have played differently. So there's always a debate in my mind. Do you burn through like the regrowth and the recall early to develop your early position and shore it up and try to achieve inevitability early, or do you save it until later in the game to utilize it to get overwhelming advantage with something like Ancestral? Like if you're recalling for like 2 to 3 cards, and Ancestral and Time Walk are 2 of the 3. Let's say a Demonic Tutor's the other. It's obviously a lot better at that point because it's probably transmuting very bad or very dead cards in your hand into something good. But I think against an aggressive strategy like the one my opponent appeared to be on, kind of a fast creature rush strategy, I think I wanted to play the third game the way I did, but that's not definitively true. I haven't played the deck enough, and obviously I don't know their deck perfectly enough to know whether the line of play was to do what I did, which was to Time Walk, which I think was right, but then regrowth the Time Walk off a drain. Take another Time Walk turn, and then recall into Time Walk, take another Time Walk turn, and then, transmute to find the Time Vault and Twiddle twice. As it was, I kind of just drew into air. I kind of just explored, which got me a little deeper in the deck, but didn't per se get me to anything relevant. So it's possible that, I wanted to wait on doing some of that. But I don't know. That's not definitively true either. I don't know. It's one of those decks that I think you probably need to play a little bit with and understand the different matchups through play testing to get used to it. The deck obviously does have a lot of cards that don't really do anything. It has a lot of cards that make mana, and cards that make mana are great, and they can bolster you into very advantageous positions early in the game, or out of nowhere after a Time Twister or Wheel of Fortune turn, which generally, in my opinion, equates to, essentially restarting the game in a lot of ways. As far as possibilities go, actually it increases your possibilities from a starting position. But, if you don't get into those draw 7 opportunities, then, you can kind of just languish, which is what happened to us, I think, in the third game, and eventually our opponent was able to find a way to win. Now, I think they got a little bit lucky, finding the exact cards they needed to take, 2 turns. But, not horribly lucky. I mean, I'm sure they had a recall somewhere in their deck that they could have used to get it back as well. So, I mean, you're probably looking at about 3 ounce in the top 4 cards. Out of 23, I want to say at that point, or 24 cards. So, it's certainly doable. But I do think this deck has a lot of potential. I think it's very fun to play. And I think it's actually fairly sophisticated. It's maybe one of the more difficult 93-94 decks I've played, just from the standpoint of deciding when you want to pull the trigger on some of your effects, because it's obviously not like Voltaic Key where you can just continue to untap the Time Vault and take infinite turns. You have to choose sparingly when and where you want to use it. And the right answer may be that you want to wait to find the time, both find the Time Vault and start taking the turns when you can generate overwhelming inevitability with it, i.e. you can twiddle the Time Vault, take an extra turn, and Time Twister into your next turn with 7 cards in hand, or Wheel of Fortune. I think, we may have misplayed that last game, but not 100% positive. Anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there. I hope you guys enjoyed this short series on Twiddle Vault versus, in this case, Erhnamgeddon. I think we played some pretty cool games, and if anything, I think I've probably learned something more about this deck that I've got built here in front of you, and hopefully you guys did as well. And if you want a challenging and fun deck to play, try this one out. And if you're an OS 95 player, this deck gets a lot better because in Ice Age, I believe they had this card Lapis Lazuli. It was very clunky, but it's not a bad combo piece because it's like a 2 or 3 mana artifact that whenever you, I want to say, cast a blue spell, you can tap 3 to untap another target permanent, which can give you inevitability. Something along those lines. I'd have to look the darn thing up. Let me see if I can look it up real fast because I'm actually curious now, and we will share in this adventure together. Yeah, Lapis Lazuli Talisman. So 2 mana, pay 3, untap target permanent. Use this ability only when a blue spell is successfully cast, and only once for each blue spell cast. So basically, you can cast Twiddle, untap it in response to the Twiddle. Or correction, no, you would have to cast the Twiddle on the Time Vault. It has to be successfully cast. Untap it. In response, pay for the Lapis Lazuli. And then tap the Time Vault, untap it again with Lapis Lazuli, and then tap it again and take 2 turns, essentially, or any other blue spell. So the deck actually, I think, has more range once you start looking at, like, OS 95. Only problem is Necropotence obviously gets a lot better in OS 95, and Hymn to Turek and the discard, monstrosity and aggression of Necro obviously becomes a lot better. So Hand Disruption is probably a lot more potent in that format. I think the Dark Ritual decks get a lot more than like the blue style decks do. But Lapis Lazuli is kind of an interesting card in Ice Age that if you go through 95 with Ice Age and Homelands, you get that plus like Merchant Scroll to help find components to support this plan. Anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there. Enjoy and take care now.